back to Tactics Talk with Guido. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I do appreciate all of your support. This episode, we have a review of the Chinese T-34-2G space FT. That's a mouthful. It's the Tier 7 Chinese Casemate TD from the new line that just came out fairly recently. So what we'll do is we'll talk about a general overview of the tank, talk about how I have mine set up. We'll dive into the tech tree, see how you get to this tank, some of the ins and outs of that. Actually pretty easy for this line. Then we'll do a comparison amongst some of its competitors at Tier 7, and then we'll roll over and do a couple examples of gameplay so you see how this thing fights. So I have it right here called up. This is it, T-34-2G FT. Fairly low silhouette. It's a casemate, highly sloped, angled armor. Not very thick though. So at Tier 7, it's interesting. The Chinese TDs before that have pretty punchy guns, but not much armor and decent mobility. At the top tiers, they start to have quite a bit of armor and start to lose their mobility. This is kind of the transition tank right here at Tier 7. Some armor, not reliable whatsoever, decent mobility, but getting the very punchy gun with the 122mm 390 Alpha gun. So that's kind of a general overview of it. If you look at it against tanks that it competes with at Tier 7 as far as TDs go, you've got the Swede, you've got a Russian tank, the AT-15A, which is a premium, the E-25, interesting on the size, we'll get back to that in just a minute. The T-25, which is the American with the turret, quite a bit different. You got the concept sitting right there. If you look at the size of the T-34-2G FT, and then you click over and look at the E-25, it is actually not that much larger than an E-25. Now, it's considerably larger, but compared to the rest of the tanks in class, this is a pretty small tank, especially if you consider its silhouette as far as its height goes and just overall size. Quite a stealthy tank. How do I have mine set up? You can see I don't have a crew showing. What happened here, I started at Tier 5 and I moved my crew all the way up through to the Tier 10. So I don't actually have a crew for it, but it's got 4 crew positions. This is where I finally got 6 cents sorted out on my crew. I had enough games by the time I got through this. When I upgraded this one, I was able to free XP all the modules other than the top gun. So I did have to grind out the gun on this one. For the rest of it, top modules, like I said, I've got a rammer, I've got vents, and I'm running the enhanced gun laying drive with a small repair kit, small med kit, and large fire extinguisher for my ammo loadout, 22 AP, 6 heat, and 2 HE. Depending on how much skill you want to load, you could increase the heat right there. But I was looking just to minimize that to some extent. But it's got the heat because you're running the 122. If you look over here, the 122 with a 192 average penetration, which is okay at Tier 7. 250 with the heat, which is quite good, so no problem once you hit 2. So that's one of the reasons why I carried the heat. The 122s are a little schizophrenic on all the tanks now. Some are running with 175 pen, some have the higher pen. There's some buffs happening as we go, so you just kind of have to pay attention to which 122 exactly it is that you are using. Let's go over to the tech tree really quickly. There's not much to say about the Chinese tanks here. These were made from whole cloth, somebody's fever dream. I don't even know if there's any kind of documentation on any of these things. But basically, especially starting at the WZ-131 and then upwards, it's based on the whole of a 131, then a T-34, then a WZ-111. Here we are at Tier 7. The thing to know about all of these is the crew from Tier 2 up is a 4-position crew, and they all occupy the exact same spot in the crew, which means you're not going to have any crew shenanigans moving them up as far as changing qualifications and things like that. So no problem there. They're all 4-man crews, and that's something that you will get when you make something from whole cloth. If you take a look then at the T-34-2G FT, this is also typical of the line right here for modules. You'll have a base module and then one next module to unlock, because that's kind of the program for the wargaming game that we're playing called World of Tanks. Some of them have 2 guns to go through. Some of them have 2 guns to go through, and I forgot on this one I actually had to go through the last gun. Had this one through free experience. So that is basically it. Let's jump into the comparison. So what I've done here, as always, is I've stripped these down as far as equipment and skills on crews. They're all set up with the best modules they can have, and with 100% crew, with nothing else. No paint, no vents, no gun rammer, nothing like that. So you just kind of get a true comparison at 100%. So I've got the T-34-2G FT over on this side, and I've just picked relatively randomly, but from several of the different nations, the T-25, the Sioux, IKV, the JP, the AMX, and then 2 premiums, even though they are preferential. We'll just take a look at how it compares those as well. So damage at 390 is tied for best in class. Penetration is decent, but not nearly as good as the AC-46. But it's better than the standard 122, which you will see on the SU-122-44, which is running at 175. Rate of fire is decent. The E-25 is an outlier with the little pew-pew gun, but if you look at the rest of them, it's on the low end, but it's not terrible. So yes, you are going to have to wait for a reload on this. 9.11 seconds. Everything else is in the 7s with the outlier of the AC-46. So the AC-46 gets quite a bit of pen for its long reload, whereas the T-34-2G doesn't get a whole lot of pen for its long reload. If you look at the gun traverse speed, that's just within the actual casemate. That's not talking about the rotation of the hull. The E-25, again, a silly outlier at 45. It just whips the gun around, so to speak. But not bad on the 34-2, and realize that that's married up with a 12-degree right-to-left regard, field of regard on azimuth for the gun traverse limits before it hits the stop and forces your hull to move. So that's actually pretty useful as far as sitting there and moving around your gun without moving your hull. It can look side to side quite a bit, up to 12 degrees as it says, and you're not going to lose a lot of dispersion by doing it because the gun traverse speed's pretty good and you're not moving your hull. So we'll keep on trucking down here. As we look at it, gun depression is okay. -5 is usable. Everything else is pretty much better, other than the Su-122-44, which has horrible -4. Talked about the gun traverse. Looking at the aiming time, it is at the top end of the aiming time. So it's got the big boomstick. It's going to be a relatively slow reload, and it's going to take a while to aim in. I talked about this on the Tier 6 and the Tier 5, where they're a bit schizophrenic, where they've got pretty good hard-hitting guns. These things want to be assault TDs, but they don't have the armor. Like I said, this is the transition tank. It still doesn't really have the armor, so you're still going to struggle a little bit with those sniper shots based on the long aim time and bad dispersion, which, talking about dispersion, it's one off worse in class at 0.38. This is where it gets a little bit interesting with average damage. It actually manages to eke out one of the higher average damage per minute of all these tanks that I have listed here. I think it's really interesting the Su-152 is so high, actually. Its reload time is really low on its 122, and it really can spit out the damage. But for the T-34-2G, it's actually not bad. You're looking at E-25 at 2800, and of course the Su-122-44, which is pretty much overpowered at Tier 7 at 3000. That's kind of outrageous. And then the 3200 that the Su-152 has. But it's pretty decent as far as the T-34-2G goes. Survivability is kind of a random thing that they put the number on, but really what are we interested in is the hit points. It's pretty soft hit points wise. It's down towards the bottom. In fact, it's as soft hit points wise as the IKV-90B is. In fact, if you can believe it, the E-25 has 30 more hit points. Yeah, go figure. Hull armor is okay, right in the middle with the rest of them. It's not the paper mache tank that the IKV is. It's not the strong front armor like the AMX is, or maybe the AT series would be, which I have not called up here for you to look at. And it is highly angled. So you will occasionally get bounces, but it is not to be counted on. Mobility gets into an okay area. Decent engine power with a specific power of 16. Not best in class. Clearly the little cockroach E-25 is crazy, but it is right in there with the rest of them. Top speed is 50, which is usable. Not outstanding, but usable. And backup speed is actually reasonable at 16. So it does back up pretty quickly for those poke out, shoot, and get away kind of shots. Traverse is nice at 4172. So it is not on the E-25's class, but it's close to 122-44, and you will have, or the enemy will have, a hard time circling this tank. Going down to concealment, this is where it gets a little bit silly for me. It's best in class at 25-31, better than the E25 stationary, if you can believe that. And then the concealment on movement is 15. And this is what you get when you just make tanks from whole cloth. These came from China, from the China server, so of course it's going to have some kind of thing that it hangs its hat on, and apparently this is one of them with its concealment. View range is on the low end at 360. There's a few worse. Actually, it's near the top. Sorry, I didn't look at that until now. 360 is pretty darn good, to be quite honest. 380 is the best on the T-34-2G, so yes, it can see pretty well. And that dreaded signal range, that's a very important stat. There it is in any event. All right, going back to the garage, let's see how I did with this tank. You can see right here that I had 29 battles to unlock this thing. 62%, not bad. 71% hits. That's a little bit lower than my average, and especially my current average as I've been playing this game and getting a lot better. So the gun did cause me a little bit of derpy problems. Damage ratio 2.5, destruction 3 for every time I died. Armor use efficiency 0.32, so it's starting to creep up. It's not as bad as the two before it, but it's not in a usable number near 1. 805 in the average experience. 1400 damage average causes. Okay, damage received 565. Cause with assistance 165. And enemy vehicles destroyed 1.66 per game. Not too bad. And I got a 7-kill game in there. So I did alright with that. 29 is a low sample size, but 62% is a decent percentage. I would expect that to get normalized probably down to 58 or 57 if I played this game up to 100 battles, which is about where most of my TDs end up being. So it was a relatively new tank when I was fighting it. Sometimes some of the newness of tanks and people not understanding about them will help you do a little bit better than you otherwise would be. Alright, so that is it for the tank itself. Talking about how I had it set up, what the tech tree looks like, and then how I did it, as well as a detailed comparison between about 7 of its competitors at Tier 7. So let's go ahead and drop in and start looking at 2 examples of gameplay for the T-34-2G FT Chinese Tier 7 TD. For our first example of gameplay, when I first saved this game, I actually titled it When It Works. And the point of that is that this tank is really good when it works, but it doesn't always work. So it wants to be an assault TD, and given a game like this where you have a very permissive environment, you can see that I'm top tier in a 357 with a massive 122 millimeter 390 alpha gun, and not a whole lot of competition as far as that goes. TDs all around, not too many tanks that I'm too worried about. So when it works, this tank is really good. Loaded in, as I said, in a 357 on Overlord on the north spawn, and I'm just going to take this thing up to the middle. So instead of camping in the back, and this goes to further tactical advice that I talk about, for TDs you need to get your gun in the game. But when I looked at the setup, I figured relatively permissive. I should easily be able to get up here and get my gun cooking. As opposed to, say, going on the A row and just hanging out at A5 or A4 and waiting for someone to walk into me. This can often surprise teams when you show up in front and start smashing their lighter skinned tanks with your 390 Alpha. So let's see how this goes for me. I drive right up to here, and so watch a couple things on this. You'll notice the dispersion can be a bit of an issue. I do use a lot of auto aim on this one just because it is an unwieldy casemate TD, and boom. So I barely let it zoom in and I just get a good RNG roll. So this game ends up being an ace tanker. I get some decent damage out of it, but just notice the RNG is working for me. When I do zoom in, pay attention to the dispersion and how long it takes to zoom in, or as far as aim in, I guess you would call it, with the gun. So the soft stats, not too fantastic. You can notice the mobility is okay. It can get where it needs to get, but it's not going to win any races. Guy comes up and I get a bounce, but I think that went off his gun. And now I'm backing up from the Cromwell. This is a pretty forward and aggressive position for a casemate TD. As I said though, permissive environment, nothing's really scaring me too much on their team, and you can usually count on the enemy's TDs in a game like this to be sitting in the back. So unless you expose yourself to them, which I should not where I am right here, you're probably going to have a good time smashing their smaller tanks. Of course, you've also got to watch out for getting rushed by their smaller tanks. So I see this guy. I'm going to try to get rid of him. I'll just take that shot, and RNG is my friend. You got the IKV moving in. I'm watching my left because they are kind of overmatching there a little bit. IKV's busy, so I'm just going to come here, auto-aim. Again, no real zoom in on the accuracy aim. Just take that shot and take him out. Dangerous to move across the ridge like that. I probably should not have done that, getting a little greedy. Backing down would have been a good idea. So we've cleared that left side, or the west side over there. I don't have to worry about that too much anymore. And a bunch of our guys that were back there sniping are moving up. So I'm just going to get up front to the point of attack. We have quite an advantage now, and I'm just looking for hit points to gobble up at this point. Taking out wounded tier 5s and 6s with a 390 alpha gun is pretty easy. Wham. That guy goes down. Back up. No need to take hits I don't need to take, but as soon as I'm just about reloaded, I'm going to auto-aim, come in on this Churchill, and once again, no real aim time. Those are both pretty close shots, but I have seen 122s miss those shots. And like I said, when it works, it's pretty good. So I go to heat here, although that is an experimental. I'm not exactly sure why I went to heat, but I'm going to catch him on his, what I believe is his engine right there. Something. Perhaps his fuel tank, whatever it was, I lit him on fire, took him down. Now watch the zoom on this one, how long it takes. Do 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 do. Okay, so again, RNG working in my favor. Brings me up to 5 kills and 1980 damage. The rest of the HP are back there in the corner. And for a wonder, we do not have a bunch of TDs camping in the corner, which has a lot to do with why we rolled this team up. We got our guys out there fighting. They sent 3 guys down on the bottom. I don't even know if we sent any because it took them a while to get around that corner. If we did, it wasn't many. So now we've got a Su-85 unwisely trying to cross in the open. He goes down. I'm going to auto-aim this guy. You can see that the dispersion circle is pretty big. It's fully zoomed in now. Again, RNG is just really on my side, and you'll notice that it continues right through to this shot. This guy's going to take a shot, and he's going to come back up, and I'm just going to drop one right on him for 2,617. 7 kills, and somebody else ends up getting the kill on the E25, and he goes down. So 2,617, only 165 on the assist, and nothing bounced. I really didn't get shot at much, if at all, in that game. So when it works, it's good. And like I said, it's a little schizophrenic. I don't have a lot of armor, so the good news is I didn't face anyone really trying to punch me in the face. It was unlikely I was going to bounce a whole bunch of those tanks. But as it was, I kind of had free reign to drive around the map. Sometimes it's a lot like you're invisible and they just don't see you. For whatever reason, nobody picks you to shoot at. They're busy with other things. And if you can take advantage of that, you can end up with 7 kills, 2,600 damage, and not nary a scratch. Looks like I did take 1 hit from somebody in there, the E25 at the end, it looks like. Let's move on to example number 2. For the second example, I'm going to show you more of a sniping type of gameplay with this tank, the Tier 7 Chinese TD, with a small caveat that it is relatively close in sniping. So remember, I said this was kind of a schizophrenic tank and didn't know what it wanted to be. You can play it both ways as an assault and a sniper, but with the gun and the derpiness, relative derpiness of it, you do want to be relatively close to your work. So you can see that I've loaded into Cliff on this one. I'm middle tier this time in a 3.57, and Cliff is an odd one, really. You only have a couple choices in a TD. You can go down here and fight on the 1-2 line. You can sit way back here or maybe up on this hill and be relatively useless for most of the map. Yes, I will use relatively most of this briefing. Or you can get aggressive and try to get around this corner or up here and poke over. But with the depression on this tank and its slow speed, I didn't really feel like I could get up in here, because if the enemy takes up this position or gets up on the hill, it can make a miserable day for any casemate TDs attempting to get here or cross over around the corner. So I will go down here, and this is not my favorite position on this map, but casemate TDs are quite limited. The other problem with this position over here is it is a bit difficult to get away from, especially if they push hard into the little donut area right there. I also do not have 6 cents on this tank yet as of the time I played this game. So I've got to be very careful. But the good news, Mr. Tiger comes in and he just drives across. I'm able to put a shot on. I don't believe he sees me. If he does, he misses the fact, but pretty soon he'll know I'm there. He pushes up, I move back, I'll put another shot into him. And it's about here that I believe that he reminds himself or figures out that I am there. And I'm thinking, kill shot time. No, not kill shot time. And I take a hit. So probably seen by that time, and he moves on in there. And now I am just hoping to disappear. The other problem with this spot is artillery can reach it if you're not careful. So what I really would like to do is get rid of this Tiger 1 who's very close to me. I also have to pay attention to that 1357. He's got quite good view range, and if he comes down there, sorry, 1375, not 57, he has a good chance of seeing me coming in there. So I'll just move up a little bit, and holy cow, another customer, fantastic. And we will shoot and bounce. So a little derpy on the gun, decent pen, but whatever it was I hit, whether I got a corner or maybe got into the tracks, I don't know. A little bit better aimed shot, and now into the side of the Tiger 2. And now I've got the Tiger 1 sitting right in front of me, making himself available. Let it zoom in nicely, and there you go. So you can see that while I am doing the sniper role here, I am pretty close to my work. So I can make this relatively derpy gun work. I'll put another 420 on him, nice little high roll right there. And the Rudy is going to be problematic because the Rudy's got pretty good spotting, and looks like the Tiger 2 saw me. So I take a hit from him, and we are 2-2. Now this position really relies on the enemy to be dopey. Thankfully for me, several dopey enemies have moved forward and made themselves available to be hit. Now I've got a Fury in here as well, and I'm going to shoot this guy. I probably would have done better to back up and then shoot him, because guess what? He sees me. Those things reload pretty well, and there's an example of the armor finally doing me some good. Take a shot, and I end up bouncing off of probably his mantlet right there, or getting into the highly curved part of his turret, and then he disappears. So now I've got to be careful, because 3 quick shots and I am out of this game from the Fury. Especially if he hits number 2, could be in big trouble. I can't rely on the armor on this tank. And again, illustrating one of the many problems with this spot. It works out if you've got targets and you can shoot through that bush and not be spotted, but now I'm sort of cornered here, and I have a couple choices. I can move forward into the bush ahead of me and attempt to find these guys, but I'm probably going to be seen by a medium who's got pretty good view range if I attempt to do that. Or I can try to back out, which has its own problems because I may be spotted trying to back out. If I turn and run, I may get shot in the rear because I know there's at least a few more campers down there. KV2 and something else has been spotted. Good news for me is this 45-02 wants to go in here and mix it up with the Fury and try to take that guy down. So that gives me an opportunity to move forward into this bush and see if I can't give him a hand or find someone else who gets lit. He's getting shot from multiple directions. Here comes Mr. Fury, and I'll put that shot into him. I'm surprised I didn't take any shots. I'm sure I was seen by that 1375, and I just take a bad shot there and miss him. I should have had that damage. So rather than sit there and see if the 1375 actually saw me, or maybe the artillery gets to hit me, I back up a little bit here. And now I'll move forward. And it's a bit of a waiting game. You can see that we've got a fight going on over by the large mountain. There's me, the M6, a KV2 sniping for some reason, and then a couple Hellcats back in the more usual, a couple TDs, one Hellcat, one SU-152, back in the more usual TD camping spots back there. So now I'm going to get a little bit more aggressive. What I'd really like to find is one of these 2 guys that were lit down the 1 and 2 line here. I also haven't seen the JPZ-4 yet. So now I am simply in a waiting game. And again, illustrating the problem of this spot. If I go forward, I'm lit and more than likely dead. I certainly don't want to get jumped on by that scout. I'd love to catch him out and put a shot into him. M6 is there to help me for the moment. And there goes our GF. So that is not very good. The Hummel has taken him out. So the scout, I know where he is. He's not a concern. The KR is up on the hill. I'm curious where this KV-2 and the other tank that's with him are. Looks like the T-35-2. Oh, there they are. So fantastic. That means there's only one tank unaccounted for other than the Arty. So I need to get over and help my team. They are getting pushed, those three in the middle. The KV-2 is out of position. I'm out of position. The M6 is out of position. My only worry is that right there. You see the shot come in, so the JPZ-4 is there. I'm hoping to get across without taking a hit, but I will not. I get hammered for 248 from the JPZ, so he is camping down there, much like I was on the 2-line. I also sort of expected to be hit by Arty. This ends up being an ace tanker, and like most ace tankers are good games, some luck is involved. I'm just glad that the Hummel was probably very busy aiming at the Jackson and the Sioux and that fight over there. So that ended up helping me out. I'll see this 1375. I actually take a pretty good lead fire shot, and unfortunately I shoot right where that that was pretty much dead on, except for the piece of terrain that came up. And I'm just sitting here waiting for the rain to drop on me. I'll take another shot here, and he dies right before I'm able to do it. And now let's move around. There's the JPZ-4. I knew he was in that area because he hit me earlier. At least he was when I went by, and the KV-2 has moved up and found that guy. He's pointing right at me. I think he's expecting me to come over, but he's dealing with the KV-2. I do a auto aim on him this time. Let it zoom a little bit and just take a chance with a shot going through. If he'd have fired first, I would have died more than likely. And now the artillery is interested in me because he's going to lob a shot in. Thankfully, he misses. And I'll come around here. I end up killing this artillery, and this is just purely from understanding where artillery goes and understanding what's already been spotted on the map and the likely positions. This one's not a huge mystery. Most people who've played this map understand that artillery is very likely to be back in that corner right there. But the other piece of information I had was the Jackson had cleared out the other likely spot over there in kind of the south middle part. So I'm really just expecting this artillery to show up right here, which he will do. I'll just already zoomed in, and we'll lap him. And ends up with 5 kills, 3,124 damage, 585 blocked. I actually got some blocked out of that. And 172 assist damage. So more of a sniper mode with this tank. As I said, it can do both. It is a bit schizophrenic. It's not amazing at either one, but the alpha is amazing, so that is a good part. I liked this tank. I ended up with over 60% win rate on it. It was a little more comfortable than the one before for some reason to me. But again, be careful with how you play it because it doesn't excel at either role, but it certainly can do both roles. All right, guys, that is it for this review on the T-34-2G FT. Overall, I like the tank. I would recommend going up the line. I recommend going up all the lines, to be quite honest. But the tier 8, 9, and 10 are actually pretty darn good, and those reviews will be coming up soon. As always, I do appreciate y'all's support. Keep it coming, and we will see ya.